all shock absorber and no power. That's a keeper. Hello anglers, my name is Travis. I'm an environmental scientist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We're out here off the coast of Monterey to show you guys how to fish for rockfish and lingcod using a couple of real simple techniques. The first I'm going to show you is the use of shrimp flies. Typically these are a 2-hook Ganyan rig. Current regulations per 2017-18 states that you may use no more than 2 hooks per 1 line per angler. So you notice both of these hooks have mylar and feathers attached to them. These are to attract several different types of rockfish species. You have your sinker on the end. The weight of your sinker will depend upon the drift, how many people are fishing on your boat, how deep you are. Typically these leaders are around 30 to 40 pound test. And then you have your connection loop with a snap swivel. The swivel is there to help reduce line twist. Got a little display of the variety of things that are on the market. You walk into any sporting goods store, tackle dealer, you're going to see all sorts of different types, sizes, shapes of lures and jigs for bottom fish, and here's a few examples. Majority of them will come with a treble hook attached. Like I said, I like to take my treble hooks off and attach a single J hook. Most of the time you'll have to put on a split ring in order to make that attachment. They do come in a variety of shapes and sizes and colors. I like fishing dark lures on dark days, light lures on light days. It's kind of the general thing that I go by. Rubber worms for your teasers. You can also use recycled shrimp flies as your teaser hooks. So let's talk bait. When I strip up my squid, I like to do strips in the long ways. I save the heads. Some fishermen don't like to use the heads. The heads sometimes will get very hard and chewy after they've been in the water. When rock fishing, I try to stay away from using whole squid because it's just not very effective. What ends up happening is the fish will come up, bite the heads off, and now you're stuck stripping your bait anyway. So we're going to go ahead and put our squid strip on again. And we'll just throw our squid head on there. So remember, thumb on the spool, take the reel out of gear, nice controlled descent. Sometimes you might get a bite on the way down. If you get a bite on the way down, put your reel back in gear and start cranking. Remember, the fish are always looking up. Should you become snagged, which is going to happen, you can snag your sinker, you can snag your hooks. Right away, you feel pressure, and you know it's not a fish. The rod's not shaking. You don't feel any vibration on the other end. What I like to do is give a little bit of slack, see if the sinker can pull your hook out, and then you'd actually do that a few times. I'd slack off, reel in the slack, slack off, reel in the slack. If nothing happens, I'm still snagged, then I'll tighten down and then shake the rod real vigorously to help try to shake the hooks loose. So we're working the bottom right now, and then I'm going to come up 2 turns. I like 2, some people do 5, as long as you remember how many turns up you are. So then you can go back to, if the fish were at 7 turns, you want to be at 7. Hit the bottom, and now I'm going to test the depths. My depth finder shows there's meter marks or fish marks really close to the bottom, 10, 15, 20 feet up. So I'm going to crank, give it a couple cranks, jig it a little bit. If nothing happens at that depth, then I give it another couple cranks. Always remember how many turns that you've come up. On this particular reel, 1 turn equals 1 foot of retrieve. So if nothing happens, I give it a couple turns. Oh, there it is, I just got bit. So now a nice steady turn. You can also put the rod butt into your hip there for extra leverage. Remember, nice steady reeling. Okay, so we have a pair of yellowtail rockfish. So yellowtail rockfish, you can tell they have yellow tails. They have these brown speckles. These are very good eating fish, excellent for things like fish tacos, fish fries, really good yield on fillet. This one's in pretty good condition. Notice no evidence of barrel trauma, eyes. In fact, they typically go down really easy. All right, anglers, so we caught a small rosy rockfish, and we're going to do what's called descending. This particular item is one of many products on the market designed to help get rockfish to go down. We don't want to just throw one of these guys over because they're going to float. So we have to get them to depth. By getting them to depth, this particular device will open up once it reaches the prescribed depth. In this case, it's 100 feet. So once it gets down to 100 feet, the pressure will force the jaws open, and then the fish will be recompressed and be able to swim back to the bottom. So usually these sorts of devices can be attached right to your snap swivel. So, majority of the time, no need to have any extra equipment. You may have to add extra sinkers if the fish is particularly large or buoyant. So in this case, we're just going to go ahead and let it sink down really slowly. Once it gets down to about 100 or so feet, the jaws will open up and then the fish will swim away. Sent our rosy rockfish with a sequelizer down. Notice we have no fish and the jaws are open. We can take off our descending device and then store our equipment. Looks like I got a pretty good hit on most likely a lingcod. So notice the rod tip, I'm going to crank down, let the rod bend, but I'm not trying to lift. I see the rod relax, I go ahead and keep winding. I got the rod butt into my hip here. Play the fish, let it tire itself out. Alright, so went ahead and gaffed this fish. This one's going to go home and be dinner for us. The minimum length for lingcod is 22 inches. That may change every year, so it's always best to consult your regulations before we go. But the correct way, when you measure your fish, the board is always underneath, the tip of the mouth closed there, and then to the longest lobe of the tail, which in this case, this is about probably a 32-inch fish, so certainly legal. Like I said, this one's going to go home and feed a few people. All right, so that lingcod was caught on this rig. It's a double hook rig, so I have a J hook up here for the head of the bait. I have another hook back here in the tail. These ones are tied based upon the length of the bait that we're using. In this case is some long mackerel that I've had from a previous trip. This is set above my sinker. The sinker is approximately 3 feet or so from where the loop starts, so that I know my bait, even with the lead sitting on the bottom, this bait's going to sit up high so the fish would be able to see it. Notice no more than 2 hooks per line. These are my 2 hooks. So I'm catching fish one at a time. Like I said, it has its benefits of potentially larger fish, but at the same time, you do go through a lot of bait. All right, so I just got bit. The fish is coming to the top here. Looks like we got a small lingcod on the jig. So I'm going to do here, I'm going to show you one of several different methods to release. In this case, because I got a lure, I can just grab the lure. And if I don't have to, it's best to not bring the fish out of the water if you can. When you're releasing fish, you want to avoid handling them as much as possible. That includes trying to bring them out of the water. It depends on the type of boat that you're fishing on. You definitely want to keep your fingers out of the gills, underneath the gill plate. I always have a pair of gloves that I can wear. But in this case, because it's a nice calm day and I'm fishing with this lure, I can just go ahead and I got control of the fish here. Take my pliers. There it goes. So another way you can release these lingcod, make sure your hands are wet, pinch the gill flaps together, and then you can release that barb, push down and then forward. This way you don't have your fingers in the gills, you have control of the fish. Okay anglers, so this concludes our instructional video. As an example of a couple of nice lingcod that we kept out of all the ones that we've released. I'd like to remind you that regulations are available on the department's website. A link will be provided below. Make sure you check for the depth restriction for your particular part of the state, as well as other things you may need to know, such as marine closures, specific closures in a particular area, as well as what the limits are. Right? So if you guys want to go out and try this on your own, if you don't have your own boat, suggest checking out one of many charter operations that operate up and down the state. Take a look at your closest harbor, make a few phone calls, ask them what they target, what the rates are, if gear is provided, how long a day is. Majority of the charter boats in most of California do provide bottom fishing opportunities. These are all rockfish and lingcod, which are readily found at majority of the depths that we're allowed to fish in, again, depending on the part of the state.